In this section, we're going to learn about parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that never intersect. They can be denoted with a lowercase letter. For example, we have here line K and line N, or they could be denoted with points on the line. For example, line AC and line GI. The parallel symbol looks like two straight lines, and we see the parallel symbol right here and right here. So those two are read as line N is parallel to line K, or you can read it as line AC is parallel to line GI. A transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines. So in this diagram, here is our transversal. And our transversal could be denoted again by this lowercase letter m, or by 2 points on the line. In this example, I used line HB. Now, when two lines are parallel and a third line intersects them, some special relationships are formed between the angles that are created. So you'll notice here that there are 4 angles up where the two lines at the top intersect and 4 at the bottom. You may also notice these angles look the same. And what I mean by that is that these top angles, if they were to slide down the line and land on top of these bottom angles, they would line up perfectly. This relationship is referred to as corresponding angles. The angles that would line up on top of each other are referred to as corresponding. So for example, angle 1 would go down and line up on angle 5. I call that the top left angle on both of those, in both sets of 4 angles. The bottom right, or the top right angle, would line up on the top right angle of the second set of angles. The bottom right would land on the bottom right, and the bottom left would end up on the bottom left. So corresponding angles are angles that are in the same position on one parallel line as they are on the other, and corresponding angles are always congruent. So I'm going to list one pair of corresponding angles. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 5 because they are corresponding. Supplementary angles we already know about. Supplementary angles are angles that add up to equal what? 180 degrees, right? So every time we have a line and another line intersects it, so we see that here, and another line intersects it, then 2 angles are formed that add up to 180 degrees. These 2 angles are referred to as supplementary angles. So if we look in our diagram, we'll notice a lot of supplementary angles are formed. For example, angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles. Do you see some others? Angle 4 and angle 2 are supplementary angles. Those 2 angles lie on this straight line, so they add up to 180. 2 other angles would be angle 1 and angle 3. Do you see any other ones? How about angle 3 and angle 4? Those would add up to 180 as well. And the same thing happens to the angles on the other parallel line. Vertical angles we learned about when we were studying angles as well. So do you remember what vertical angles are? When 2 lines intersect, they're going to form angles that are across from each other. So here we have 2 lines intersecting, and we have angles that are formed across from each other. We know that these 2 angles are what? They're congruent, right? So we also have another pair of angles that will get formed that are congruent. All the angles that are across from each other are congruent with vertical angles. So if we look up in our diagram, angle 3 and angle 2 are vertical angles. Therefore, they're congruent to each other. Angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles. Therefore, they are congruent to each other as well. Do you see vertical angles in the second parallel line? So what I'd like you to do now is to list some of these angles. So with the corresponding angles, let's see if we can come up with another pair. So I said angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. And we know corresponding angles are congruent, so I wrote it as angle 1 is congruent to angle 5. Do you see another pair? What about angle 3 and angle 7? It doesn't really matter what order I write these in. So angle 3 is congruent to angle 7 because they're corresponding. So in a minute, I'm going to have you pause the video and list the rest of the corresponding angles the way I have listed the first two. Let's look at supplementary angles. So we saw some of the supplementary angles. I'd like you to list all of them, but let's start by doing one together. So give me an angle supplementary to angle 5. Maybe angle 6. You might have said angle 7 as well. So the notation we're going to use here is the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 equals, what should they equal? 180 degrees, right? And I'd like you to go through and list all of the pairs of angles that are supplementary. And you should find 8 pairs. With corresponding angles, you should find 4 pairs. Let's look at vertical angles. So with vertical angles, they're the angles across from each other. So for example, angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles. And they're congruent, right? So I would write angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. There are 8 pairs of congruent angles that are vertical in this diagram. So you're going to actually stop this video. This is the first video of a series. And you're going to list all the corresponding angles, supplementary angles, and vertical angles that you find. And again, there are 8 pair of corresponding angles. I'm sorry, 4 pair. There are 8 pair of complementary or supplementary angles, and there are 4 pair of vertical angles. Good luck.